Hello, everybody. Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz, and I feel like I say this every week now, but there is a lot of ground to cover. No midweek show this past week when there wasn't a whole heck of a lot going on, but now we have a slew of headlines here and a very thought provoking mailbag from John Wilner that I want to go through as well, where I think he makes some points that I'm a little bit in disagreement with on him, but he I think is very thought provoking. Again, is the key word there. I think he raises a lot of really good questions, including what is going to happen with Oregon and Washington if an Arizona or a Colorado were to leave toward the Big 12. And on that note, we're continuing to see this narrative shift toward, hey, nobody's leaving the Pac 12. Well, from nobody's leaving the Pac 12 to the Pac 12 is going to be fine, even if Arizona and or Colorado leave. So we're going to start to examine some more of that shift. But in terms of bigger news items here, the biggest is what you see on the headline, which is, hey, man, the Pac 12 is getting sued. The league that just can't get out of its own way when it comes to negative headlines adversely affecting the league is now going to have to deal with a lawsuit. And this all stems back to the Comcast issues where they are owing all this extra money to Comcast because of overpayments that were made for a long time. And Larry Scott is the real ultimate culprit here. But George Kliavkov's name was mentioned in this lawsuit. And it sounds like the Pac 12 is not happy about this at all, and they intend to fight it. So this is going to be a little messy. And it's another thing on the Pac 12's plate here. If you're keeping track, obviously they've had all this trouble with the media rights deal. The number two in charge just left, albeit to go to a consulting firm that is now going to work with the Pac 12, but they just lost the number two. They have this Comcast deal where schools are potentially going to lose $4 million per year off of it. And then now they're getting sued over all of that. So that's a lot to handle and a lot to digest for a league that desperately needs a new TV contract in order to, in their eyes, hopefully satisfy the current membership. On top of that, Dennis Dodd wrote his latest piece, which, I'll be honest, I have some mixed feelings on it. I think he pointed out some things that are very true, like that Fresno State's, the rumor about interest from the Big 12 side on Fresno State is pretty ridiculous. So we will get into that, but I think he kind of flips it on its head and does the same thing with UNLV in the same article here. A little bit of the same shade of thing going on there and whether or not the Pac-12 would actually be interested in UNLV. So a lot to break down, a lot to digest here and I'll take in, but we're going to do it over the next hour or so here on the show. So that's what I have for you all here today. You guys know if you've been here before, you can dictate the content that occurs on the show here tonight. You can do so and make your voice heard by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. You click that $, you can get your question or comment in. It will supersede everything else in the chat. Pin it up at the top for me so it is a way for you to get on the show here tonight, dictate the content, and support what it is that I'm doing and bringing you Big 12 content week in, week out, because I could not do it without your support. All of you guys who do that make this possible, and I genuinely do appreciate it. If you're catching up after the fact, not watching it live, you can support the channel on Venmo. It's John-Kurtz-4 in order to do that. And a totally free way that you can support the channel that I would much appreciate right now is just simply by liking the video. Just take that cursor over, one click for me, like the video. That will help me a lot, helps me with the YouTube algorithm, and as always, is much appreciated. Believe that's it. I'm trying to think, am I missing anything else housekeeping wise? Like the video, comment on the video, leave a comment for me if you're catching it after the fact to help boost that algorithm. Michael, what's up, Michael? Michael, I appreciate your support of the channel. Michael checking in here early just says, love your work, bro. So excited for BYU in the Big 12. I think I speak for most everyone else here that, yes, we are very excited to have BYU coming into the league as well, especially now that I've got my T-shirt, man. I've got my T-shirt that was mailed to me. So I'm ready. I'm ready to be a bandwagon BYU fan. Whoever it was that suggested to me last time that I go check out the Holy War for a game. Now I'm geared up. I'm geared up if I ever were to do that. See somebody asks about Wednesday night. Just wasn't a lot of news. There was not a lot going on. We had a lot going on in the back half of the week, but there wasn't much new for a Wednesday night live stream, and trying to find some pockets to take some breaks here or there in the schedule. So anyway, that's where we are at. Let's get into the Pac-12 getting sued, man. it feels like we've almost got a bingo card at this point for the Pac-12 in what is going on. Like, what negative headline, what negative issue are they going to have to deal with next? I definitely didn't have it on the bingo card that they would be having to repay Comcast for overpayments that have been happening since 2017. Did not have it on the bingo board that they were going to get sued as a result of that either, and that is what has happened here. So, former Pac-12 executives Mark Shuckin and Brent Willman have filed a wrongful termination complaint against the conference following their dismissals for their role in the Comcast overpayment scandal. Shuckin, the former president of Pac-12 Networks, and Willman, the Pac-12's former CFO, were terminated January 20th for failing to properly report millions of dollars in overpayments made by Comcast to the Pac-12 networks. But the complaint alleges they did, in fact, properly report the issue. So their suit is saying they did actually properly report this issue. They repeatedly told then Commissioner Larry Scott about the situation after it was discovered. And Scott told them, quote, not to say or do anything. Now, we can stop it right there, especially for those in Pac-12 country. They're reading this and just like nodding their head along the way and saying like, yeah, I mean, of course that's what happened. Larry Scott has drawn the ire of many a Pac-12 fans. He's been a punching bag. He has been, by any objective measure, I think a disaster of a conference commissioner. Certainly the deal that he made for the Pac-12 network has been a disaster and kind of an albatross hanging over the league for a while now. And he probably put some things in motion that eventually led to USC leaving. Now, maybe the dynamics of the college athletics landscape would have preceded that happening anyway, but there's a lot I think Pac-12 fans can rightfully pin on Larry Scott for the issues that their conference has. And so when you have all of that as the backdrop, this picture of a guy who was not very competent in that role, this would not surprise you to hear that, oh, hey, a couple of the people right below me brought to my attention that Comcast has been overpaying us, and in a league that was, fairly cash strapped and definitely feeling the stress and pressure of the Pac-12 networks not working out, it would make sense to be like, wait, why they're paying us a little extra? Like, hey, let's just keep that hush hush. Like, see if they notice, right? See if they notice. Mom starts kicking in a little bit of extra allowance. You're like, hey, let's not tell anybody. Let's just wait and see if she notices, right? Ask for forgiveness, not permission, sort of deal there at the time. That is a very believable allegation here, which is why I'm very interested in the fact that the Pac-12, when asked to comment, to John Wilner, who is writing this article that I'm reading from, asked to comment, the Pac-12 issued the following statement to the hotline, quote, the claims being alleged are wholly without merit, and the Pac-12 intends to vigorously defend against such false claims. I guess that maybe saying I'm surprised by that is a little bit strong, because the Pac-12 is not going to want to have to deal with paying out any kind of punitive damages here and deal with that. They would want to defend their honor, I suppose, but I think anybody within the Pac-12 right now would tell you that Larry Scott was not good. Larry Scott caused a lot of problems, and this is certainly, at least to me, just from the outside looking in, within the realm of very believable things that would have happened here. A little more context from Wilner's article says, the overpayments continued for years and are believed to have totaled $5 million annually over the course of a decade before Comcast discovered them in 2022. They've left the Pac-12 schools at significant financial risk, with Comcast expected to withhold approximately $50 million in revenue distributions to the networks, or $4.2 million per school. That's really the number that matters more. $4.2 million per school until the expiration of its contract in the summer 2024. So, I guess you'd be looking there at $8.4 million per school total that they would be losing in an era where every penny matters and everybody's trying to pinch pennies right now and get the most that they can out of the TV deals. That is not great. The lawsuit seeks injunctive relief, claiming the statement published on the Pac-12 website that announced the terminations of unnamed executives has caused irreparable harm to their reputations. Damages are in the amounts to be established at trial and believed to be in excess of $2 million. So $2 million is what the Pac-12 would potentially be facing here in punitive damages that they would have to be paying out. So, I mean, that's not crippling. That's not like a $20 million damage potentially there, but still not something that the Pac-12 is going to want to deal with. So this whole thing, I mean, we've already, what was the number earlier was $50 million. You're already at $50 million that this has cost you. Now it might cost you an extra $2 million. This is becoming a pretty expensive bill here for the Pac-12. And really, again, the more expensive, I would argue, even than the $2 million, the more expensive piece of this is just being another distraction and being another negative headline. Like you can't turn right now on Twitter without running into some negative Pac-12 headline. And the league just cannot get out of its own way. Like, is this going to significantly impact anything realignment wise? Like, no, but you've got a lot to worry about right now. Colorado had the board meeting recently. Now, nothing substantial obviously came of that. You certainly would have heard about it if it did, but it seems that the wheels are at least in motion for Colorado to be thinking about what it is that they're going to be doing. Arizona has already publicly come out and said that they have a decision to make. They're just being patient and waiting on George Kliavkoff to put a deal on the table right now. So that's a lot to handle for a league. That's a lot going on. You don't need to be dealing with, I was going to call it frivolous, but I guess from the Pac-12 standpoint, in regards to what their ultimate goal is here with the TV contract, it's a frivolous lawsuit that you're having to deal with right now too. And regardless of I don't know what to make of the situation of the number 2 leaving and then joining a consulting firm to help consult with the Pac-12 and all this, but you did just lose your number 2 in charge there. There's just a lot of extracurricular stuff going on that's going to take some of your attention away from what the real prize is right now, which is just putting that TV deal on the table. So I don't know, like reputations do matter. If you continue to take negative headline after negative headline and get a real beating in the press, like the Pac-12 is right now, eventually there can be some real sustained damage from that. The Big 12 has dealt with that for a very long time. So the Pac-12 just continues to step in it right now. So that's the basis of what we have here. Let me see if there was anything else from that story. We didn't get to the Kliavkoff part. My apologies. And I see Matthew, an extremely generous donation. I will get to that in just one moment, I promise. I'm going to finish off just this article here in a little bit on George Kliavkoff, who is mentioned in this. So Larry Scott is the real primary culprit here, but George Kliavkoff's name was mentioned, in fact, it says a few times in the 32-page document in the lawsuit, with each reference citing an exchange with Willman in mid-January. So one of the two plaintiffs here. Willman, as CFO, had prepared a financial forecast for the Pac-12 presidents in advance of a board meeting on January 30th. The slide deck included details of the 2017 audit and audit that initially exposed the overpayments. Okay, so he's preparing, one of these guys that's suing them at one point in mid-January is preparing a financial forecast for Pac-12 presidents in advance of a board meeting. That slide deck included details of the 2017 audit that exposed the overpayments. And according to the complainant, Kliavkoff expressly directed Mr. Willman to remove all mentions of the 2017 audit from the board deck to shield any mention of it from the board. It's added here by Wilner in the article that by then the board had known about the situation for months and Willman was 3 days from being terminated. So it wasn't like it was preventing that information from getting to them. It sounds like, I guess the insinuation would be here that Kliavkoff just did not want to bring that up in a discussion, did not want to trouble anybody with that at this point in time. I guess you could speculate more about what the motivations there specifically would be. But he's at least like somewhat involved here. That to me does not seem terribly damning unless I'm really missing something here. But yeah, I mean, I think the Larry Scott piece of this is the huge crux of the case. It says the complaint doesn't include Shucken or Willman mentioned the overpayments to Kliavkoff between the time he became commissioner in the summer of 2021 and the discovery of the overpayments by Comcast in the fall of 2022. So basically, like there, it was saying like it's they didn't make Kliavkoff aware of that before I guess everybody else became aware when Comcast became aware and then approached the conference about it. So that now, in a nutshell, is what we have with the Pac-12 case here. The suing of the Pac-12 having to deal with all of this in court. It will be very interesting to me to see what winds up happening with this, how this is going to go, how much the Pac-12 will have to devote time and resource and energy-wise into this to fight something like this. But certainly is not good. It just adds, it's another thing you can laugh at. You know, it's another tweet that you can just take in and laugh at the Pac-12 for. Matthew, what's up, Matthew? Matthew Hunsaker, appreciate you being here, my friend. And thank you for your generous support of the channel. Extremely generous. Thank you for that. Matthew says, well, K-State is already beating Mizzou last year and probably this year. Which of the Colorado, Nebraska, A&M defector trio would be most satisfying you? Bonus points for the BYU t-shirt. Hey, thank you for that. which would be like, I assume this means like, which would be the most satisfying to defeat out of Colorado, A&M, Nebraska. I mean, to me, it's a pretty clear Nebraska. Mizzou was really fun, and I will tell you this: those of you that are listeners to my K-State podcast with Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, Threemaw, we did an interview with Deuce Vaughn on Friday that I believe is going to drop tomorrow, and he talked about how basically the most fired up and angry he got before a game was Mizzou for a couple of reasons. One, somebody had found a sheet of paper that Missouri was using in their facility throughout the week that was just a picture of Deuce and said, like, don't let number 22 beat you. And he caught wind of that, got a picture of that, and was very determined to beat them because of that, because they were focusing so much on him. Now that, I'm not going to say there's anything really wrong with Mizzou on that. That's what you should be doing, right? That's what you should be doing, is focusing in on Deuce. But flip side of that is when they went out for the coin toss, he told a story about how they didn't shake hands. They wouldn't shake hands at the coin toss, and that really incensed Deuce and the team. And he basically said, like, hey, that was about as fired up as I've been for a game in my career because of the disrespect there from Mizzou. And with a coach like Eli Drinkwitz, that is 0% surprising that is how Missouri would conduct themselves, and then 0% surprising that they would go on to get their ass kicked in the game. So anyway, just had to get that in there for the Mizzou fans out there. But Nebraska would be the most satisfying to beat. Look, A&M dealt K-State probably what will go down at the end of time as the greatest heartbreak in the history of K-State athletics. Would have played in the national championship game if not for a double overtime loss to Texas A&M in the Big 12 championship game where they blew a 17-point lead. But they're a punching bag for me at this point. It is fun to make fun of their ludicrous spending and mediocre results, but I don't have the same like hatred that was built up there for Nebraska. Colorado, I'm just more apathetic about. I mean, yeah, their fans kind of sucked back in the day, but I like Boulder. I'm just a little more neutral on them. They've been terrible, like completely impotent as a football program for the last 15 years. Nebraska, meanwhile, still feels this aura of superiority over the rest of their former Big 8 brethren, which is just patently ridiculous based on what their program has been for going on 25 years now. And shout out to them for bringing back Frank Solich to the spring game and then just farting out a terrible effort that I saw their fans were crapping all over, thanks to Message Board Genius, the Twitter account. But yeah, it's Nebraska. I mean, just the hubris that they have there for that program, even though they have been wretched for a very long time now. That's the one. That's the one. And there was quite a rivalry built up by the end of Nebraska's time in the Big 12 in the late 90s and early 2000s with Snyder against Osborne, and then Solich, Callahan, like everybody that followed. So because of all of that, it's definitely like Nebraska K-State. When I was really hitting my first peak as a fan, like coming of age as a K-State football fan, 10, 11, 12 years old, like that was the rivalry. It was K-State, Nebraska every year for the Big 12 North. So I've still got a lot of that pent up in me and in there for me. So it would definitely be the Huskers. Definitely be the Huskers. But I appreciate the question, Matthew, and I definitely appreciate your support. Immensely appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here and for generously donating. If you want to follow suit, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something to join the conversation here tonight. It'll make sure that your question or comment gets in the live chat, and I will read it. We'll discuss it on the channel tonight. Also, a way that you can support me bringing you Big 12 content on a week in, week out basis here on the channel. Could not do it without you guys, and it is always much appreciated. Also, 264 people in here, only 60 likes on the video. If you could like the video right now, I would appreciate that as well. Totally free, and that helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Comment on the video after the fact if you are not watching this live. Tell me you love me, tell me you hate me, or whatever it might be. I will take it all. I would appreciate that. You can also support the channel on Venmo. It is John-Kurtz-4 in order to do so. All right. So there is the Pac-12 getting sued, and that could have been its own real discussion or own separate video. I feel like the rest of this stuff could fuel an entire live chat as well, both the Dennis Dodd article and the latest from John Wilner as he came back from vacation with a bang, with a mailbag that was almost entirely centered around realignment topics, and I thought was very good. I want to start with what would have been the lead if not for the Pac-12 getting sued, and that is Dennis Dodd talking about UNLV. This is one where I don't know, man. I can't really get behind this as much as he is here. And I'll just read it to you. But I think by the end of it, the insinuation is like, hey, this should be a pretty attractive expansion candidate for the Pac 12. Maybe it's in tier two. I think it is certainly not in tier one. We know that to be San Diego State and SMU. But I'll read you Dennis Dodd's reasoning here on the Running Rebels. He says the news this week that the Oakland Athletics are preparing to move to Las Vegas should be setting off alarm bells. How does one ignore Vegas's college football future now that the city has emerged as a sports capital? Two men's professional teams, the Raiders and Golden Knights, and soon to be three with the A's. 5 leagues holding their conference basketball tournaments there each year, plus major neutral site games already being scheduled. LSU and USC open the 2023 season September 1st at Allegiant Stadium. It's already a Pac-12 hub with the conference's basketball tournament located in Sin City. Cleve Cobb joined the league from Vegas, where he was previously an MGM Resorts executive. The Final Four arrives for the first time in 2028. Don't forget WNBA Aces, XFL Vipers, the NBA G League Ignite. I guess I hear that and I'm kind of like, I don't know. Clearly, Vegas is on the come up as a sports city. I would not deny that. But do the professional sports teams moving there really, truly warrant taking UNLV just for the sake of taking UNLV? We're in this weird period where it's not quite as market driven as it used to be. Conference realignment, that is, much more brand driven, much more success driven than it was, as I think some of the conference execs, TV execs learned their lesson from the last round of realignment that was based much more around just TV markets and stuff. So UNLV just don't have the cachet. They are maybe in like an incubator stage where you're just going to have to kind of nurse them along to the point where they actually get, sorry, I'm trying to read Matthew's note there. So I just think UNLV they don't have this history. They don't have this cachet. They're in a sports city that is on the rise, but they need some work. It really needs some work. If you want to say, hey, they have a lot of potential, I suppose I can get behind that. But let's see. Like the end of the blurb from Dennis Dodd here says, all that makes the Barry Odom hire enormous. That's who UNLV just recently hired. The former Missouri coach, most recently Arkansas defensive coordinator, has a lot of responsibility. Not only to turn around the program, but possibly make it presentable for a new conference. The Rebels have posted one winning season since 2000. Since moving to Allegiant Stadium in 2020, UNLV is 7-23. Yeah. First of all, I didn't realize they were playing in Allegiant Stadium. I learned a lot about UNLV from this. I didn't realize they were playing in Allegiant Stadium. I did not know that they were 7-23. I probably could have guessed that they only had one winning season since 2000, but that is like that's worse than what I would have anticipated. So I don't know, man. The whole profile there just doesn't seem like something that's going to add up to somebody that is going to be added like in this round of conference realignment, or that should ever realistically really be considered for this round of conference realignment. I think it kind of goes back into, I'm trying to remember what was the Pac-12, like Rice had been brought up there, Tulane. Tulane, I feel like should honestly be, they're closer to being able to compete regularly, right? At the football level, certainly with where they're at right now. And even, I took some flack from a couple of Tulane fans where I was like, hey, much love and respect for your program, but I don't really think that you guys are ready for the show right now. Now, maybe this turns into like 5 to 10 years down the road. You continue to position yourself, you continue to win, you continue to do things like you did last year. You will be in a good spot, but you're going to have to work your way into that. I feel like UNLV is definitely a team that falls much more in that category than anybody that should be realistically considered, at least to get this much publicity here. And let me finish reading this, and I'll make the point that I feel like Dennis Dodd almost has taken a page out of the Canzano playbook a little bit here with this one, where Canzano continues to push like, hey, the Big 12 has some interest in Fresno. Fresno would be a potential fit for the Big 12, but not the Pac-12. And that felt to me like taking one little bit of information, some sort of phone call that was had that may not have been directly related to realignment, or just a very, very cursory, like, hey, let's just, you're somewhat on the radar. Let's talk just a teeny bit, like a very intro sort of phone call, and then blasting that all over anytime that they get brought up to try and make the Big 12 look bad. It almost feels like there's a little bit of that going on here. Here's a quote from the former athletic director. I apologize, I don't know the first name here. Former athletic director of UNLV said, "quote I think they're sitting in a great spot. Not only is it an institution that has improved themselves academically, athletically, I don't think there's any question the new football staff has a great chance to hit the ground running." Like, I mean, okay, but that's that quote. And again, I get this guy has been around that city for a while, and he's going to want to talk them up. But what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, the new football staff has a great chance to hit the ground running. I mean, okay, it's a program that has had one winning season since 2000. I guess like I would hope that they do. I would hope that they do. It says one must assume the Pac-12 would be interested in making a play for UNLV as they are already considering expansion with the likes of San Diego State. The Big 12, which is also exploring its expansion options, has not indicated any official interest in the Rebels. When Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark recently said his conference was open for business, it's wise to assume UNLV, among other similarly positioned schools, picked up the phone. And then he adds, UNLV, think of a buy low, sell high situation. Well, the school doesn't bring pro rata to the Big 12 or Pac-12, meaning equal value. Grabbing the Rebels may be an investment in what Las Vegas is becoming, a sports mecca. It was thought at one time the Pac-12 would relocate to Vegas. Well, that makes sense. Like, relocating to Vegas makes sense if the Pac-12 wants to change its headquarters there. That would make sense. Set up shop there. Keep an eye on UNLV, right? Like, be in the door, be closer there to watch their development. Keep a sharp eye on what's going on there, but certainly not pounce on them right now. I don't know. Just felt a little bit like, I don't know, is this a favor to somebody in Vegas? A favor to somebody that is very pro UNLV here? I can't take that one too seriously, and I don't know that it's really fair to be listing that as a legitimate expansion option for the Pac-12, which Dennis Dodd's only like loosely doing there. It's kind of a gray area in all of this. But I will just say this is a part of where, I say, like, I try to be fairly neutral on here, call it like I see it, and I'm giving you a Big 12 slant, but I'm not just going to absorb everything here. And I won't take this and run with it and be like, oh man, the Pac-12 is looking at UNLV. What a terrible situation they're in. None of that. I'm not going to sit here and say that at all about this. I don't think there's a realistic chance of UNLV being there and being a legit option. I think, look, as Vegas continues to rise up as a sports city, if that momentum can carry UNLV to being a better football program and more productive as a program, and Barry Odom, I would agree, is an immensely important hire at this time, as any school that would be like a second or third tier expansion option in this situation, they would be facing the same sort of thing. Whoever's their coach right now is very important. And that goes for different levels. Like other schools, we're going to discuss later a line that John Wilner had where he's talking about the currency in college football is about to be playoff appearances once the field expands. And the best way to be in the best position when we really go to like 2 or 3 super conferences, whatever it might be, is to continue to make playoff appearances. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the coaches that are in place now. Same deal at UNLV. It's just about 2 or 3 steps lower. So anyway, interesting it got brought up, but I don't really agree with that being mentioned as any sort of serious expansion candidate right now. Now, I'm not claiming to have any sources or connections on all of that. It just, to me, is being realistic about the situation. Matthew, I see Matthew says, okay, so these are coming in as pesos. That's interesting. I was like, it has an MX in front of it, and I was like, I don't know what this really means, but okay. So Mexico. So these are coming in pesos. That is interesting. Well, shout out to Matthew for sending the pesos from Mexico. Says John can't take too much credit for generosity paying you in pesos. Work trip can't keep me away from good Big 12 content. That sounds like a fun work trip, man. I'd like to go to Mexico for work. Question: how long until George Kliavkov is fired if there's no TV deal? That to me feels like that would probably go hand in hand, right? I mean, well, or I guess I would kind of put it like this. It feels like there are 2 things on the table here. One, he's going to get a TV deal that is at least appropriate enough to keep the conference functioning in some form. And whether that's as currently constituted or it's losing Colorado and Arizona and adding San Diego State and SMU, maybe another team or 2, and kind of keeping the league on life support. In that situation, like, he probably does survive, I would think. At least if you believe the Pac-12 narrative that is shifting now, where they seem to say like, hey, the league would be fine. They'd move on, grab 2 expansion candidates and be okay. If you're going to believe that narrative, I think he would probably keep his job, even though I'm not sure people would be thrilled. But the other option is just that, yeah, the TV deal is not satisfactory. lots of schools leave, four corner schools leave, or and not they take enough damage from that the conference is going to just implode, and then maybe Oregon and Washington with a new Big Ten commissioner go take a reduced share to join the Big Ten, and the conference just totally blows up. In which case, it's not really going to matter what happens because the conference will kind of cease to exist, or at least cease to exist in any real format like it is right now. So if there's like literally no TV deal, like they just don't get it, well then, yeah, I mean he's going to be out, and they'd have to get somebody in there that can just get something. But I think like there will be some TV deal brought to the table. It's just going to be whether or not anybody opts to actually sign it. So yeah, if it's super low, $20 million per school or something terribly low, then like schools will bolt and the league probably just kind of falls apart. And if it's not that and it's a little bit better, then it probably maintains itself as a league and he doesn't get fired, I would think, I guess is kind of a long way to say how I feel about your question there. But it's a good question. That's a good question. And clearly there has been, I mean, we've seen the Arizona State president at one point voiced public frustration about it. Like we've seen some chinks in the armor and some public frustration actually being voiced by some folks here. So I think there clearly is some discontent within that group. If I were in that group, I would feel very upset by the fact of kind of like what was originally pitched and promised for the potential value of the league and what it's actually turned into. That has to have ruffled some feathers. So I think, the seat's definitely warm, maybe not hot, but warm, but a lot of it will just come down to whether or not the league survives. Like that's kind of the true test here, whether or not you're going to have a job. It's an interesting situation that he finds himself in. Michael, what's up, Michael? Michael says Vegas draws more dollars and people with a BYU game. Yeah, I know BYU has played some games there, and there has been a great BYU crowd when they have played those games. I think Vegas is great for that. I think if they wanted to, it would not shock me if at some point in time the Big 12 basketball tournament would be played in Vegas, whether or not that's on like a rotating or semi-permanent basis, contract for a couple of years, or if they're just going to rotate it. I would imagine that would be one of the host sites there. Obviously, a lot of conferences are already doing that. Yormark seems to want to move west in a lot of different ways. We've heard the comments about the time zone, the extra inventory, being there with his actual schools, well, establishing a presence there in a city that has been kind of a mini Pac-12 hub. Guess one would be a nice troll move to get there, but also probably has some tangible business benefits too. I'm all for getting into the city and getting Vegas involved and being a part of that as much as you can. But to me, it's overkill to be adding UNLV to do it. I mean, just how are you going to make the dollars and cents of that work? Yes, it is like an investment long term, but I would just want to see more returns or more signs that there will be returns on that investment before I actually made it. I just think it's way too much in the infancy right now. The football program is just bad. I mean, it's just been a bad football program for a long time. Russell, just lost you, Russell. Where'd that go? Here we go. Russell, what's up, Russell? Russell says, do you think the Pac-12 is delaying announcement of deals simply to string schools along and make them stay? Appreciate the support. Appreciate the question, Russell. I don't. I mean, at this point, like the Pac-12, if they get some sort of a deal, they would have to move quickly and just get it in front of everybody. I mean, think of all the negative press that they're getting, all the negative headlines they're taking, all the, Colorado's having board meetings. There have been rumors about Colorado and Arizona getting a little bit antsy here. The Arizona president has come out and publicly said, we'll have a decision to make once we can get the numbers from the Pac-12. Like you can't mess around on this thing. And I think they know that. They're smart enough to know that. You cannot mess around. And there is a plausible explanation for why it is taking so long. And we've seen it reported by many at this point, which is just, in essence, they're dealing with streaming partners here, Apple, Amazon, whoever it might be. And those we've heard from like the Sports Business Journal guys who deal with them on a regular basis. Those take time. They don't care about schools trying to leave or what the Pac-12 really needs. They are newer to the game here in terms of signing these deals, right? So they're less experienced in it. It's going to take them longer because they're less experienced. And because if they're they're massive companies, Apple and Amazon. So they don't really have to be beholden to anybody else. They are major conglomerates. The Pac-12 doesn't have leverage over like an Apple or an Amazon to make it move faster. So it stands to reason that these would be going on the Apple Amazon timeline. They are very complicated, and also they are new to the space, new to this live college sports space. So for all those reasons, I think it is pretty plausible as to why it is taking this long. The problem, once again, for the Pac-12 has been over-promising, under-delivering. You've had people publicly saying for a long time now, including the Pac-12's own unity statements, that things were going to be taken care of in pretty short order, and obviously that has not happened. So it's been like managing expectations here. That's been a huge part of the problem for the Pac-12. So that's how I would answer that, Russell. But it's a good question, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate you being here and supporting the channel in the chat tonight, my friend. Alan, speaking of my friends, what's up, Alan? Great to hear from you tonight. Alan says, John, sounds like life is better in Truck Stop U conference than in the Pac-12. I have a meeting in KC this Wednesday, but free on Thursday evening if you want to join a Jayhawk for a beer. Rock Chalk Jayhawk, Alan. Hey, Alan, you better come down to the draft. I'm gonna be hanging out at the draft. So hit me up on Twitter in the DMs at JL Kurtz, JLKURTZ on the Twitter DMs. If you're gonna be hanging around the draft around Union Station, that is where I will be. I think I saw somebody else ask me in the chat at one point in time if I was going to be going to the draft. I don't really know what my specific plans are, but I live very close to Union Station. So I will definitely be walking over there to check out whatever it is that I can check out. It's a cool, exciting thing to have the draft here. Although close to where I've lived, the street's been shut down for weeks now at this point as they get it all ready. So it's been quite the undertaking here in Kansas City, but I'm very much looking forward to that. But yeah, Alan, get in touch with me on Twitter at JL Kurtz if you want to try and facilitate that. Definitely would love to meet up with you sometime. We'll see if we can make it work this weekend or not, but just let me know. Just let me know, my friend. Let me see. Was there something? Oh, just life better in the Truck Stop U conference than in the Pac-12. Yeah, hey, I mean, truck stops aren't all that bad. I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart for the truck stops. As somebody who spent 10 years traveling all over the conference to cover K-State, going to every K-State football home and road game, there's a lot of driving there. We drove almost everywhere, a couple of flights, but almost everywhere, especially down to Texas and Oklahoma. I feel like I've seen every Love's along I-35. I've been to Buc-ee's. I've been to a million Quick Trips. I feel like I've seen it all, and I can appreciate a good truck stop, man. I can appreciate a good truck stop and a little snack stop at said truck stop. So yes, Alan, we definitely have far fewer problems. The Big 12, for instance, is not being sued. Buc-ee's, to my knowledge, is not trying to sue the league. I've not seen that anywhere. Quick Trip not trying to sue the league, nor former employees of the league. So feels like the problems are less in the Big 12. Keeps jumping on me. Delaric, what's up, Delaric? Delaric, thank you for your support. Delaric says UNLV would be a possible third choice to keep the Pac at 10 if three schools, Arizona State, and Colorado, leave for the Big 12 for a bad TV deal. Okay, I mean, yeah, I guess that could start to make sense if you're going to be replacing more than just two. The other thought, I guess, would be they're already thinking about expansion right now. If you lost Arizona and Colorado, do you then feel the need to get back up to an 11 or 12 and go to your next tier? Maybe UNLV is in that next tier. I don't know. I just feel like we had, I'm trying to even remember whose report it was at the time where Rice and Tulane were floated, because I think that was Wilner that had mentioned Rice and Tulane before UNLV was mentioned there. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I have that right, which just to me would tell me that UNLV is probably even a step below those, maybe a third tier expansion sort of option right now. So I'm not trying to look. I did not come on here with the intent of running down UNLV. If you're a UNLV fan, man, I wish Barry Odom the best. I wish that football program the best. I think it would be very exciting if UNLV became viable. I really like those UNLV basketball teams like Larry Johnson when I was a very young kid coming up. I got nothing against UNLV. I don't think that they're positioned right now to really be a serious expansion candidate. Your scenario is interesting, saying Arizona State, and Colorado, because seems to be that the Arizona State smoke has cooled much more here, and that there's a more likely scenario where it's just Arizona and Colorado leaving, and then the Pac-12 would have decisions to make about what it is that they want to do, how far they want to jump in terms of membership and numbers there. Daniel, what's up? Cat fan in Huskerland. Daniel Osborne, appreciate you. As always, my friend, thank you for being here. Daniel says, just warming up after a ho-hum NU red and white spring game. For me, the real excitement was seeing my daughter getting her medal with teammates before the game for graduating high school. Great show, John, and go Cats, man. Kudos to you, Daniel. I mean, I guess you had some real reason to be there at the game, but kudos to you for sticking it out for a red white Nebraska spring game. I guess this year is a little more intriguing because it's the first year of the Matt Rule era, as opposed to another Scott Frost spring game, roll it out there. So there probably was some more excitement. I know they did the gimmicky, like bring Frank Solich thing back, which can we talk about that for a minute? I mean, if that's not the most trying to like pay the football gods back, like get back in the good graces of the football gods thing I've ever seen, I don't know what is. Like, hey, we fired Frank Solich for going 9-2, and our football program has been a disaster, just a dumpster fire ever since we did that. Let's bring the guy back and try and prop him up a little bit, apologize, so to speak, and get some good juju back from the football gods. And then all I see is complaining about Nebraska's spring game there. So I don't know. Best of luck. Good luck with that. Well, the better way to say it would just be good luck with that, Nebraska. Good luck with that. But yeah, sitting through that, Daniel, you deserve a medal for that. You are the one that deserve a medal. I mean, I know your daughter, I'm sure, does too, but you are the one that also deserves a medal for doing that. So best wishes. Congratulations to your daughter for graduating high school and being honored there at the game. And I appreciate your support of the channel as always. Thank you, sir, for being here tonight. We got a couple more to get through here. Boom to the Sooner. What's up, Boom to the Sooner? Feels like it's been a minute. Thank you for being here, Boom to the Sooner. Glad to see you. Says, shouldn't Yormark move the Big 12 basketball tournament to OKC, seeing Oklahoma is more in the middle and OSU is still going to be in the conference? The problem, I mean, they've done the OKC and Dallas things before, and it just didn't seem like there was much excitement to it. Like, I think basically those two are kind of in the same category to me as Kansas City and what it's doing for you, being like a regional hub, a place that is like regionally fits what your conference is at. And they just do a poorer job of it than Kansas City, where like Kansas City, the city's on fire. It's very exciting. Power and lights, like filled with fans. You get Iowa State, K-State, KU fans that will always make that thing really well attended. There's more apathy for basketball with Oklahoma and Texas. Kind of Oklahoma State, although, I think Cowboy fans, when the team is doing well, they will support it in full force. So there's less support. It's not done as well. And then the real advantage here, and where the reason I wouldn't even discuss it, is because like Yormark just has his eyes on going national. Like Yormark doesn't really care about the regionality of it. He's trying to make that a national product. And if you follow like what I really believe now, which is that he is definitely trying to pursue this idea of separating the basketball rights, getting as much money as possible for them, making it a separate entity away from the football rights, right? If you're trying to do that, you want to make it more national. The idea with that would be that you go add Gonzaga, you go add Villanova, Creighton, UConn, whoever it might be, from like the Big East, and really conquer the entire basketball world. And then you're going to want that thing to be in maybe Brooklyn, maybe the Garden, maybe Las Vegas. Like I would throw out all those destinations and perhaps be rotating it and moving it, trying to create just a national brand. And OKC, nothing against OKC, but it just is not going to move the needle as far as that goes. So I think it's either like you keep it regional and go to the place that does it very, very, very well, and nobody is going to top in a regional area for the conference, or you're trying to really expand this thing and go national, which I do. I mean, again, not really based on any inside information, but just the way everything is trending, I would expect at some point that to happen for the Big 12. That feels like Yormark's ultimate vision with this thing. So I would think that you're going to see that at some point in time. McMuffin, what's up, McMuffin? Thank you for being here, my friend. McMuffin says George K might be worse than Larry Scott. Rolling on the floor laughing. Hey, George Kliavkov has not performed very well. I will give him enough credit now to say that I'm not going to put him below Larry Scott if we're doing like commissioner power rankings here. Like Larry Scott was pretty bad. He was pretty damn bad. If Kliavkov messes up this TV deal and then his resume is like, well, hey, USC and UCLA technically got away on his watch. He massively overpromised, didn't deliver. He publicly said that his league was going to catch up to the Big Ten and the SEC financially, and then he didn't even deliver on a TV deal to keep the conference intact. If that happens, then yeah, now maybe we can have a real discussion here about like who was the who was the worst commissioner out of the two. But for now, I will look. I'm going to let you take your shot, McMuffin. You get to say what you want, man. You donate, you get it up there, and I'm not here to say George Kliavkoff has done a good job by any stretch of the imagination. But I will at least. He's still ahead of Larry Scott in my commissioner power rankings, which now I'm going through in my head. I'm like, be kind of fun to make like a commissioner power ranking list here at some point. I don't know, like where would Dan Beebe, good old Dan Beebe, fall on the commissioner power ranking list? We could have some fun with that. We could definitely have some fun with that. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you, Boom to the Sooner, for your support again. Boom to the Sooner says, do you think Yormark will want to keep the Big 12 football championship game in Arlington? Interesting question. I think there's probably a better chance of that because that is such a Jerry World is such a big place, such an attraction. It's a great place for the game. It is still, fairly region. I was going to say centrally located. It's not really like centrally located for the league, but it's within the region. It kind of doubles as like a huge national place and is a place within the region. But keep in mind, like what did we say just a minute ago about Vegas and like everybody moving into Vegas? Probably not going to add UNLV, but maybe it's moving the conference championship game at some point to Vegas. I don't know. I don't know how all that works with the Pac-12 obviously doing it too. But if you're really trying to move west and if you're going to be adding schools, 2, 3, 4, whatever it might be of the four corner schools, maybe then they start to look that way too. I don't know. But Yormark is always like generally thinking like bigger than what we traditionally are here, which has been good for the Big 12, right? That's a huge part of the allure of Yormark. He's thinking much more bigger picture, national. How can we make this brand bigger and coast to coast than just us fans that have been used to keeping it all very close in with us here, thinking about our regional spots and like what matters to us as opposed to, hey, what's the best move for the long-term health of the conference here to develop this brand as much as possible? But that's a very good question. It's a very good question. Delaric, chiming in again. Thank you, sir. Delaric says, agree that Tulane and Rice would be better choice for football, but UNLV is having a resurgence in basketball, and that would bring them up possible. Okay, well, the basketball thing is an interesting point. I think like if you were talking about the Big 12, because the Big 12 seems to have like much more of an interest in basketball and the basketball piece of it. So maybe that's something to watch out for down the line too. But for the Pac-12, it just, I think they don't have this option of being like a big basketball superpower like the Big 12 and milking some extra money off of that. So probably UNLV basketball would be a more valuable entity to the Big 12 than to the Pac-12, if that makes sense, I guess is the way that I would frame that. But yeah, I'm on board with you. Like I think Tulane and Rice, no matter what you're going to say about UNLV basketball would belong. Well, Tulane for sure belongs higher up there. I don't know. Maybe Rice and UNLV is kind of a wash. And maybe even UNLV could move in front of Rice in my eyes because of the whole pitch of the city. I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. Rice is another one where it's just like the football brand and the football program is just next to nothing. I know they have great academics, but boy, just next to nothing there with football. Okay, so Dennis Dodd, boy, we have a lot. Okay, got about 12 minutes here to try and fly through this. But hey, if you've got something else, if you want to chime in, click the $ below the chat box where it says say something to get your question or comment on the show. This can serve as your like 10 to 15 minute warning here. So running out of time if you do have something for me. Also, if you could please like the video, I would appreciate that as well. And leave a comment underneath the video also. Here's Dennis Dodd on other expansion candidates. Now this is the point. If you follow me on Twitter, you saw me definitely chime in on this part. But he says on Fresno State, somehow calls from the Fresno State administration to the Big 12 have been misconstrued as interest from the Big 12. At this point, there is no Big 12 interest in the Bulldogs, seemingly not even as a fallback option if other expansion falls through. Even with Yormark desiring a presence in the Pacific time zone, Fresno State doesn't move the needle with San Diego State and Pac-12 schools possibly still in play. Complicating matters, try to imagine Stanford in the same Pac-12 with Fresno State. Well, yeah, I certainly would not expect the Pac-12 to ever go Fresno. But I love what he says there. This is what I've like hypothesized about for a while. Calls from the Fresno State administration to the Big 12 have been misconstrued as interest from the Big 12. I mean, the guy that we've seen say that over and over again is John Canzano. Like Canzano, I don't know if this is specifically meant to be calling him out. I feel like Wilner maybe has mentioned that some, but has not beaten that drum nearly as much as Canzano has, who seems to work it in about once a week or once every other week that, hey, watch out for Fresno in the Big 12, which to me always seemed like just trying to sully the Big 12's name a little bit there, bring up some negative headlines for the Big 12 there. Like, oh, you guys, why would you be interested in Fresno? Fresno, not good enough for the Pac 12, but the Big 12 is sniffing around there. Like, come on, man. Nobody ever legitimately believed that. And my point on that, and those of you that have watched the channel for a while, you know exactly what I'm going to say here. My point on that is not that nobody in the Big 12 has ever done it. Like, I would even say Dennis Dodd bringing up UNLV, like I talked earlier in the show. Dodd bringing up UNLV is kind of in the same vein as Canzano and Fresno State. Like, to me, I wouldn't really take that too seriously and feels almost like a little bit of a trying to sully the name of the league by associating them with that there. I'm not saying that hasn't happened on the other side, but the problem is Canzano and the Pac-12 folks, but predominantly Canzano would tell you, like, the Big 12, 12 and on, they're the ones doing that and bringing up stories like this. Like, no, my friend. It's exactly what you've been doing too. You are the same as all of us. We are all like fighting this same fight where we have our biases, we have the people and leagues that we sort of stump for, that we're going to give you their take from that angle. I think Wilner does a very balanced job of doing that. I would claim that I do a fairly balanced job of doing that, even though you are admittedly getting a Big 12 slant. But Canzano just seems to have no self-awareness about that. And I like that from Dodd, because to me, that was kind of like just a little reality check on what is going on here on both sides of this conversation. He talks about Boise State. He says, once the best of the group of five, the Broncos have slid. Boise State is the number 98 TV market, somewhat isolated in Idaho, and no longer the emerging power it was under Chris Peterson. Big 12 already has BYU in the Mountain Time Zone. Says, like Fresno, Boise might qualify as Pac-12 backfill if the league loses teams. Boy, that's another one that I'd have a hard time seeing. I think if Stanford line with Fresno plays out the same with Boise. Like, can you imagine Stanford in the same league as Boise State? I just can't imagine Stanford wanting to do that. Brings up Memphis too. That seems like one that hasn't been really seriously thought of in quite a while. As far as this Pac-12 narrative shift goes, I do want to get into that. I'm going to address our Webb's question here real quick, but John Wilner's mailbag, which I'm not even going to have time to like properly really devote enough attention to, I think, in this live show, maybe deserving of a standalone video. We'll see later this week. But very interesting in how we're seeing this really shift pretty quickly for the Pac-12, or for a long time it was nobody's leaving. Why would anybody think anybody's leaving? To now, like, well, hey, even if Arizona and Colorado were to leave, league's going to be fine. League's going to be fine. Our Web says, John, thoughts about the Big 12 preseason men's basketball event. Our Web helped bring this to my attention, so shout out to Our Web for doing that as always, and I will read you the update on that. So John Williams, who is the Big 12 vice president of men's basketball, was on a podcast, and he said, quote, what we're looking at is a Big 12 preseason tip-off where some of our teams that only play each other once in the conference will match up. The first week in November is where we're looking right now. And then he was asked, like, would this be on campus? Would these be neutral sites? He said neutral sites. So what the Big 12 is thinking about doing is having a preseason tip-off event where in November, like right at the beginning of the non-conference schedule, right as the season is starting, they would have Big 12 teams play each other in non-league games. These would not be league games that count toward league standings. They'd be teams that, with the schedule being uneven and unbalanced now with the number of teams that are in there, you would have teams that would not be playing each other twice during the regular season, picking up an extra game against each other in the non-con, and do it very early on. I like it. I mean, it's fairly innovative to me. It seems to be a kind of an evolution or an iteration of what the Big 12 was doing with the SEC Challenge, the Big 12 SEC Challenge, because with that, I remember having many a conversation with like Bruce Weber when I was covering the team, and we would have press conferences, and he would be talking about like, hey, yeah, like nobody's really crazy about the timing of the Big 12 SEC Challenge, but the reason that they were doing that in the middle of the conference schedule was to get a full day of coverage on ESPN, right? ESPN just blows it out. They promote it a lot. It's on all the ESPN family of networks. You just get a lot of publicity out of it. And that's what they really liked about it, even if it was not the most convenient thing in the world because of the timing of it. This kind of feels the same to me. Like, I'm sure there would be coaches that would not be thrilled with like, hey, right out of the gate, I've got to go play a conference team before I get any sort of real warm up in here. But you're going to get extra attention for it. I'm sure there would be extra attention devoted to those games that are going to be televised on ESPN or Fox or whatever it might be. you're going to get some extra run for that and more eyeballs on it, because that'll be a more enticing, exciting game than watching you go play directional state, whoever at home. And so that to me would be the idea. You're trying to create kind of a unique sort of game and experience that's going to draw more attention and eyeballs when other leagues aren't doing the same. Like the reason the Big 12 SEC Challenge worked to get attention, it's like nobody else was doing that. You just had conference games everywhere else. And so this could be like a made for TV sort of event done up with the Big 12 SEC Challenge. And I think this is the same sort of thing. It's also going to help drive some more rivalries a little bit quicker, help teams play each other more often, and just be, again, more exciting games. It's hard to get high profile teams to come play you at home in non-conference games now. Like everything, and it's really kind of the same in football too, where like you have more and more games moving to neutral sites at the beginning of the year, right? Like down in Atlanta, Jerry World, whatever it might be. You've had a lot of teams playing in games like that as opposed to doing traditional home and homes. Basketball, it's the same way. You've got, they're doing games on aircraft carriers, for God's sake, before they're doing legit home and homes between big teams. They obviously have the tournaments that everybody plays in, like around Thanksgiving, where you're going to neutral sites to play those games and get the real meat of your non-conference schedule there. So this becomes like a built-in way to try and get good non-conference home games for teams too, which is sort of an advantage of that. So I'm okay with it, and it to me it just provides another feather in the cap for trying to develop this basketball portion into something bigger, adding extra media value like that. I would imagine adds a little extra media value to your media partners who would be interested in Big 12 basketball media rights too. It just seems like everything is with an eye on bigger and better, particularly with the basketball product, and making as much out of it as you can. So I'm definitely open to the idea. I'm not sure how much coaches will love it, but I am as a fan, a consumer, somebody worried about the viability of the league and the success of the league. I think it's potentially a good thing. So be interesting. Okay, from John Wilner's mailbag. Let me read you this. It says, if a worst case scenario occurs and one of the four corner schools takes the Big 12 offer and two more follow, what actually becomes of the conference, and what happens to Washington and Oregon if the Big 10 is not ready to expand? I'm glad that Wilner addressed this, because that is a scenario that I think is a pretty fascinating one. What happens to Oregon and Washington if, in this case, he's saying hypothetically 3 schools go to the Big 12 from the four corners. Even if it's just 2, I would wonder as well. But 3 is like, now you're really teetering on, all right, so you're going to have to go add 3 expansion candidates to backfill here. Like, what happens to the league? And so I think that's probably where that number comes in at 3. But Wilner says, great question, and one that we have contemplated often over the past 10 months. There is no indication the majority of Big 10 schools are interested in adding new members in the short term and thereby detonating the Pac-12. Could that sentiment change if the Pac-12 implosion is triggered elsewhere with a handful of schools leaving for the Big 12? Perhaps. And in that event, the new members would assuredly enter the Big 10 at a reduced rate. We're deeply skeptical Fox, NBC, and CBS would pay an additional $280 million annually to add Washington and Oregon and the Bay Area schools, which would be the amount needed to keep all 20 universities whole with revenue shares. And I completely agree with that. I do not think any of those schools would be getting full shares, especially at that point where they would really lose some leverage. If the Pac-12 is falling apart, you definitely have no leverage. I don't think you're getting a full share by going to the Big 10. So then he says, so any Pac-12 schools in desperation mode likely would have to accept a reduced rate to join an 18 or 20 team league. He goes on to say, at this point, it seems any rupturing of the Pac-12 is more likely to begin with four corner schools. Earlier this year, one hotline source called Arizona and Colorado the primary flight risks, with Arizona State and Utah preferring to remain with the California and Northwest schools. So that's interesting. I don't feel like I've seen Wilner ever say that before. And he's saying, like, earlier this year, he was told Arizona and Colorado are the primary flight risks. And that, I think, is where you talk about like some of the Pac-12, you're getting like a Pac-12 slant there, not making a big deal out of a source saying that. Whereas on the Big 12 side, you hear that, someone catches wind of that, you're going to blow that up and turn that into a bigger story, even if it is just the same information. But he also goes on to say, but to that end, comments by Arizona President Robert Robbins this spring are highly relevant. He appears content to wait it out to give Commissioner George Kliavkoff more time to construct the best deal possible. Could one school cause the conference to fracture? If Colorado panicked and fled to the Big 12, would the others follow, prompting the Northwest schools to beg the Big 10? We aren't convinced the Buffaloes don't have the clout or valuation to trigger a mass extinction event if the other four corner presidents believe Kliavkoff will deliver a satisfactory deal. The Pac-12 could replace Colorado with San Diego State and roll on. As Robbins remains patient, stability should prevail. This is where, like, just subtly the narrative is shifting. That's all I will point out there. And I'm not even saying that that's like a crazy take. If you threw San Diego State in for Colorado, I know Coach Prime with Colorado kind of adds a different element here. But in general, I think that would be fine. But I thought the idea here was to expand and not just be backfilling. And so you're going to lose out on some potential extra revenue, inventory that you would have available to TV there if you're just going to stick at 10 and only add San Diego State as a replacement instead of going and expanding. I think that would be a slight problem in everything that's going on there. And it's just a change. Even addressing it in this way, even if there is some truth to that, addressing it in this way, it's a far cry from what it was before, which was a very absolutist stance of nobody is leaving. Nobody is leaving. Nobody is leaving. Nobody is leaving. And now you're just subtly seeing it shift with most of these guys now to addressing more of this. And I've even seen Arizona and Colorado, you go add SMU, you go add San Diego State, you're losing the two worst football programs in the Pac-12 over the last decade or whatever. Who cares? They'll be fine. They'll be okay. Might well be true, but it depends on what is the definition of fine. That would cause a lot of, I just think some of this is in the tertiary things that would come along with this, less stability, more people potentially freaking out, more bad headlines that you're losing actual legitimate schools then to the Big 12. The Big 12 gets a PRW for pulling off something they said that they were going to do, and you fought and said was impossible for a very long time. There are just a lot of tentacles to that outside of just hey, in a vacuum, we lost the two worst football programs and we replaced them with SMU and San Diego State, which is fine. I don't think it operates quite in a vacuum like that is really pushing it to be there. So anyway, just my thought on that and where it's going. There's a lot more there from Wilner. I will either save it for a midweek live or try and get you a separate video on that coming up this week. I think I'm going to cut it off there for the live show here tonight. But this has been fun. This has been busy. Feels like kind of a marathon of a live show tonight with everything that we have going on. But I sincerely appreciate all of your guys' support. Please like the video if you could. If you have not yet, I would much appreciate that. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you've got the bell click so you know when it is that I'm going live. And you can support the channel on Venmo. It is John-Kurtz-4 if you're catching up to this after the fact. Like the video, leave a comment, love me, hate me, agree with me, disagree with me. All that stuff helps. Drives up engagement, drives up the YouTube algorithm for me. So I'd appreciate it if you did that. And continue to spread the word, guys. Word of mouth, social media. Let your friends and family know if they are a Big 12 fan, if they're a fan of college football, of conference realignment, that this is the place to be and a great community to be. So let's continue to grow this awesome community that we have here on the channel. Really appreciate everybody being here tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will be talking to you soon. Take care.